When police arrived at 43 Raven Street, the front door was already open. The lights were on, flickering like the house itself was breathing. Inside, they found a cell phone lying on the floor, still recording. The video lasted exactly 48 minutes. It began with nothing unusual: faint footsteps, the sound of television static, and the quiet hum of an old refrigerator. But in the final minute, a girl's trembling voice whispered into the phone. "Please, please, he's in the house." Her name was Emily Rhodes, 19 years old, a college sophomore working a part-time babysitting job. That recording was the last trace of her existence. By the time officers searched the house, she was gone. No forced entry. No struggle. Just a single phrase written on the wall in dust: "Do not answer the phone." 3 days earlier, Emily had answered an online ad for babysitting. It was short, almost suspiciously simple. Babysitter needed. One night only. 6 p.m. to midnight, $150 cash. No photo. No contact name. Just an address, 43 Raven Street, and one strange instruction. Please arrive before sunset. Do not go into the basement. Emily joked to her friends that it sounded like the setup for a bad horror movie. But college was expensive, and one night's pay could cover a week of groceries. She sent an email. An hour later, she got a reply confirming the job. Raven Street sat on the edge of Fairview, a quiet, respectable suburb with clean lawns and silent neighbors. The house itself was older than the others, tall and narrow, with faded blue paint and windows that reflected no light. The locals rarely spoke about it, except to say it used to be a funeral home. When Emily arrived that Friday evening, the sky was red and heavy with clouds. The homeowners, Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, greeted her at the door. They looked ordinary polite, a little pale, and anxious to leave. Mrs. Calloway led Emily inside, showed her the living room, and introduced her to their son, Oliver, a quiet 7-year-old boy with dark hair and wide, unblinking eyes. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Calloway paused at the door and gave one final instruction. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she spoke. "Keep the hallway lights on. And if the downstairs phone rings, do not answer it." Then they were gone. For the first few hours, nothing felt strange. Oliver watched cartoons while Emily scrolled through her phone. She texted her roommate a joke about the house's creepy vibe and the rule about the phone. At 7:45, she put Oliver to bed and made herself some tea. The night was quiet. Until the phone rang. It was an old rotary telephone, cream-colored, sitting in the hallway downstairs. Emily froze. The sound was too sharp, too sudden, like something breaking the silence on purpose. She hesitated, remembering the warning. Then the ringing stopped on its own. She exhaled, half laughing at herself. But before she could sit down again, the light in the hallway flickered once, twice, and stayed dim. Something in the air shifted. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes the world feel smaller. At 9:14 p.m. a message appeared on Emily's phone from her roommate. "You good?" She started typing a reply, then stopped. Because she'd just noticed movement in the reflection of the living room window. It was faint, just a shadow passing behind her. She turned quickly, but no one was there. Outside, the street was empty. But the curtain kept swaying, as if someone had brushed past it. She locked the door, checked on Oliver upstairs, and found him fast asleep. The child's bedroom smelled faintly of old wood and dust. She whispered "good night" and turned to leave. That was when she heard the scratching. It came from the air vent in the hallway, slow, deliberate, like something metal dragging across the inside. She leaned closer. And in the next second, everything went still. Then, faintly, a sound came through the vent. Not movement this time. A voice. A whisper that carried her name. Emily. She stumbled back, heart pounding. The whisper stopped. A vibration buzzed in her pocket, a text from an unknown number. It read, "Answer the phone downstairs." Before she could react, the rotary phone started ringing again. This time, louder. Longer. Emily took one step toward the staircase. Her breathing grew heavier on the recording. Each step creaked under her feet. And then, just as she reached the bottom, the phone went silent. She stood there for a moment, staring at it. The stillness was worse than the sound. Then somewhere deep in the house, a door closed. The recording found on the floor of the Raven Street house was just over 40 minutes long. Investigators said the first 20 were calm. Ordinary sounds, footsteps, television static, the hum of an old refrigerator. Then, around 9:14 p.m. something changed. The audio captured a second sound. A scrape. Slow, deliberate. As though metal brushed against the inside of the wall. Emily's breathing grew louder on the tape. She whispered to herself, trying to calm down. She didn't know the house had a hidden ventilation shaft connecting the basement to the upstairs rooms. At 9:22 p.m. the first of the neighborhood calls came in. A woman across the street reported seeing a light flicker in the upstairs window. She said it blinked 3 times, paused, then blinked again. She assumed it was a signal. By 9:30, Emily had called her roommate. The transcript shows her voice steady but nervous. She said she kept hearing someone whisper her name. Her roommate thought she was joking. She laughed it off, said, "You're probably just scaring yourself." That was the last call Emily ever made. The Callaway residence was built in 1906. Originally, it served as the town's first mortuary. The basement, sealed decades ago, was where the embalming took place. The current owners, the Callaways, claimed to have bought the property cheap because of its unfortunate history. They never mentioned that 3 babysitters before Emily had quit mid-shift. When the police later interviewed Mrs. Callaway, she said she heard noises too. That's why she left the lights on and why she told Emily never to answer the downstairs phone. She said the calls never came from the outside line. The next segment of the tape was faint. The landline rang again, and this time Emily answered. She whispered a single word, "Hello." There was no reply. Only static, then a sound that experts later identified as someone inhaling close to the receiver. Emily hung up. On the recording, you can hear her footsteps moving toward the hallway. The boards creak, her breath quickens, and in the background, just barely audible, another set of footsteps matches hers beat for beat. She stopped walking. The other steps stopped too. That was the moment the investigators believe she realized she wasn't alone. Emily climbed the stairs to check on Oliver. She opened his door, and for a moment, everything was quiet. Then, faintly, she spoke, "Oliver." The tape captured no child's response, only the sound of a music box winding somewhere in the distance. The toy was never found. She closed the door and started back down the hall. Then came the whisper again. This time it was clear. It said, "Don't leave." Emily gasped, stumbled, and dropped her phone. It clattered across the wooden floor, and the camera flipped over. The image froze on her feet as she turned toward the stairs. Something moved in the corner of the frame. A shadow, crouched low, just beyond the light. At exactly 9:47 p.m. 2 more calls were made to emergency services. Both reported screams coming from Raven Street. By the time the first patrol car arrived, the lights in the house had gone dark. The neighbors said they saw a figure at the upstairs window. Some said it looked like a man. Others insisted it was a child. The responding officer entered through the unlocked door. He found the phone still recording on the floor. The kitchen table was overturned. And upstairs, in Oliver's room, the bed was empty. Both the babysitter and the child were gone. 2 days later, the Callaways returned to town. They told police they'd left Oliver with Emily as agreed, and had gone to a wedding an hour away. Their phone showed no missed calls that night. Their story didn't change, but something in their tone unsettled investigators. When asked why they kept the old rotary phone connected, Mrs. Calloway replied, "We can't disconnect it. It rings every night, whether it's plugged in or not." It started with a sound. Soft. Barely there. Like the whisper of a sock dragging across the hallway upstairs. At first, Daniel thought it was the pipes. Old houses do that, stretch their bones when the weather turns cold. But the sound came again. Slower this time. Step, step, pause. He held his breath and looked up at the ceiling. Right above him, his children's room. He smiled to himself. Maybe the kids were still awake. Maybe Lily needed water again. But when he checked his phone, there was a text from his wife. "Kids asleep. Finally. Don't make noise." He froze. The footsteps didn't stop. They grew heavier. Like someone dragging a foot. Daniel turned the volume down on the TV. Every sense stretched out like a wire pulled too tight. He heard the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall, and above it all, the unmistakable rhythm of movement. He took a step toward the stairs. The air felt heavier near them, as if it carried the weight of breath. "Lily," he whispered. No reply. Only the sound of something brushing against the wall. His phone buzzed in his hand. A single notification, unknown number. No message. Just white noise leaking through the speaker, hissing softly like whispering voices layered over each other. He hung up. It called again. That's when he heard it. A voice. Muffled through the phone's static. A woman's voice. Saying his name. Daniel. He stared at the screen. No caller ID. He whispered back, "Who is this?" No answer. Just a faint click and then silence. He called out again, louder this time. "Lily. Ben." Still nothing. He climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath his feet. He could feel the vibration in his knees, the cold wood pressing through his socks. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched into shadow. Every door was closed except one. The children's room. It was open just enough for a sliver of light to escape. He pushed it open slowly. The nightlight glowed faint blue against the walls. The kids were there, sound asleep, their chests rising and falling in rhythm. He exhaled, smiling at himself. Maybe it really was the pipes after all. Maybe. He spun around. Nothing. The hall was empty. Only silence. He tried to open the door again, but it didn't move. The knob turned, but the wood refused to give. Then, from behind him right above the kids' beds came the sound of something scratching inside the ceiling. Like nails dragging slowly through the plaster. Daniel whispered to himself, "It's just mice. Just mice." But he knew better. Because the sound wasn't random. It spelled out a rhythm. 3 scratches. Pause. 2 more. Like something trying to speak. His phone buzzed one last time. He looked down. The same unknown number. He answered, hand trembling. A voice came through. This time clear. A whisper, just above a breath. "They're not asleep." But when Daniel turned, both of them were still. Eyes closed. Smiling in their sleep. It was almost midnight when Claire found the old laptop in the study. Dust-covered. The kind that hums before it breathes back to life. She'd been babysitting for the Marshalls only a few weeks, but something about that night, something in the silence had started to feel wrong. When the screen lit up, she saw folders untouched for years. One name caught her eye, Surveillance 2019. Curiosity always starts softly. A whisper that tells you, just look once. She clicked. The videos were black and white, each labeled by date, each showing the same empty rooms she'd just cleaned that evening: the hall, the nursery, the basement door. Except one file. One was named "Do Not Watch." She hovered the cursor for a long moment, then clicked. The video began. A young woman appeared, sitting on the same couch Claire was sitting on now. A different babysitter. Same room. Same rain outside. The woman on screen kept glancing behind her, toward the stairs. A timestamp in the corner read, March 18, 2019. 11:47 p.m. That was the night the marshals told her someone broke in. But they never said what happened to the girl. The woman stood. The screen flickered. A figure passed in the background, barely visible, thin, tall, hair hanging low, head tilted as if listening. Then the video froze. And the timestamp changed. March 19, 12 a.m. No more footage. No more girl. Just the sound of breathing. Claire slammed the laptop shut. The room went black. She grabbed the landline. The dial tone crackled. She called 911. It connected, then cut off mid-ring. She tried again. This time, only static. That's when she heard the TV turn on upstairs. She hadn't touched it. Her voice cracked. Hello. No answer. She climbed halfway up the stairs. The laughter grew clearer, but it wasn't coming from the TV anymore. It was coming from the wall. She pressed her ear against it. Something pressed back. The wall pulsed. Once. Like it was breathing. She stumbled backward. Her phone buzzed again, unknown number. She answered, whispering, "Who is this?" The voice was hers. "Leave the house." She froze. It remembers. She turned and ran to the front door. It wouldn't open. The lock spun in circles like it wasn't attached to anything. She pulled harder, screaming, but the keyhole filled slowly with black water dripping from the inside. She stepped back. Every light in the house blinked at once, then all the TVs came on. Every screen showing the same thing, her own face, in real time. Standing there, frozen in front of the door. And behind her, in the reflection, the tall, thin figure. Watching her. She turned, but nothing was there. Only the whisper again. She stayed too long. Claire's chest heaved. She backed into the study, grabbing the laptop. On the screen, the video feed still played. But the date had changed. October 27, 2025. That was tonight's date. And the video was still recording. Her face staring back at her. She realized then. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive. It watched. It remembered. Every visitor, every sound, every breath inside its walls. And now it remembered her. Claire didn't remember when she dropped the laptop. She only remembered the sound it made when it hit the floor. Like something exhaling. Her body felt heavy. Her fingers wouldn't unclench. The air was colder now, thicker, almost damp. Every breath she took came with a faint echo, like the house was breathing with her. She whispered, "This isn't real." But the words didn't sound like her own voice anymore. She turned. The reflection in the window stared back, her face pale, but her eyes, wrong. They were looking at something behind her. She spun around, nothing there. Then the floorboards creaked in the hallway. Slow. Steady. Step. Pause. Step. It was walking toward her. She backed away into the kitchen. The clock on the wall had stopped again. 12:03 a.m. The exact time the babysitter vanished years ago. Her phone buzzed once. She picked it up. A new notification, recording started. She wasn't holding the camera. Somewhere, a camera was watching her. Claire shouted into the air, "Who's there?" The answer came from every speaker, every vent, every dark corner. "You let me in." She froze. That was her voice again, but distorted like it had been dragged through static. She ran to the basement door, thinking it might be a way out. It opened slowly. The smell hit her first: wet concrete, metal, something old. She descended halfway before realizing. The light wasn't coming from above. It was coming from below. Down there, a flicker of white and red light pulsed like a heartbeat. And faint whispers drifted up. Children whispering her name. "Claire. Claire, come play." She froze mid-step. At the bottom, she saw it. The old CRT monitors, dozens of them stacked against the wall, each showing different moments from her life in the house. Eating dinner. Reading to the kids. Sleeping on the couch. But one screen was different. It showed her now, standing halfway down the basement stairs. She watched herself blink on the screen. And then on the monitor her reflection smiled. She didn't. The version of her on screen whispered something. She leaned closer to hear it. "You belong here now." Her body locked. She tried to move, but her arms felt pulled like invisible hands guiding them upward. She screamed. Her voice warped, echoing through the screens even though they were black. The air hummed again, and something beneath her skin began to crawl, like cold water moving under the surface. She looked down and saw fingerprints, tiny, child-sized, pressing from the inside of her arm. She fell to the floor. The lights flickered. For a split second, all the monitors came back on. But they weren't showing her anymore. They were showing faces. Hundreds of them, all staring. All silent. The house remembered every one. The whispers rose to a chant. Her name, over and over. Claire. Claire. She crawled backward toward the stairs, but her hands left wet streaks. Not sweat. Not water. It was thick. Dark. She looked back at the basement wall and realized. It was covered in handprints. Layer upon layer. Like everyone who had ever tried to escape had reached out for help and failed. Something reached from the dark and touched her shoulder. She didn't turn around. She couldn't, because her reflection in the nearest screen leaned in close and whispered again, "Don't fight it. You're part of the story now." Her vision blurred. Every sound slowed: the heartbeat, the static, the whisper, until everything stopped. Then, nothing but a single tone. Long, shrill. Endless. Like a flat line. When the marshals came home at dawn, the house was silent. The lights were off. The kids were asleep upstairs. But the laptop was open on the study desk. And on the screen, a live video feed. Claire sitting perfectly still, smiling at the camera. Timestamp, October 28, 2025. 6:13 a.m. And beneath it, a message appeared on the screen. Recording saved, Babysitter_003. When the marshals returned, the house looked ordinary again. The storm had passed. Sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, cutting thin lines across the living room floor. But something about the air felt wrong. Still. Heavy. As if the house was waiting. Mrs. Marshall called for Claire. No answer. Her voice trembled as she checked the nursery. The kids were asleep, both breathing softly, untouched by the night, but when she stepped into the hallway, her phone buzzed. A notification. From their home security system. New recording available, 12:03 a.m. She tapped the alert. The footage loaded. A grainy video showed Claire standing in front of the door, crying, pulling at the lock. Then she turned toward the camera, whispering something. The sound was faint. Mrs. Marshall turned up the volume. Claire's voice said, "It remembers." Then static. The Marshalls called the police. By the time they arrived, the house looked untouched, no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no trace of Claire. The officers checked the basement. They found nothing unusual at first. Just the smell of damp earth and a wall lined with unplugged monitors. But when one officer brushed the surface of the far wall, the paint flaked off. Underneath, carved into the plaster, were names. Dates. Emily, 2015. Sarah, 2017. Lucy, 2019. Claire, 2025. They photographed everything. But later that night, when the lead detective tried to review the footage, all the files were corrupted. Every clip ended at the same exact timestamp, 12:03 a.m. And at the end of each video, one frame flashed by too quickly to notice at first. When slowed down, it showed a face. Claire's. Eyes open, faint smile, staring directly into the camera. Officer Daniels gave his report the next morning. He said the basement lights turned on by themselves. He heard children laughing, but the kids were still upstairs, asleep. He said he felt something brush past him, a cold gust that whispered his name. The other officers didn't believe him. Until the same thing started happening to them. Phones ringing from numbers that didn't exist, body cams switching on without command. Footage appearing in their archives labeled with names no one recognized. That week, the Marshalls moved out. The house was listed again 2 months later. And people came to see its families, couples, a few investors. Each one walked away without finishing the tour. They all said the same thing: they felt like someone was watching them. The real estate agent claimed the lights sometimes turned on by themselves. And once, during a showing, she swore she heard a girl humming upstairs. But when she checked, the rooms were empty. The laptop was never recovered. Police said it must have been stolen. But weeks later, a video appeared online. Title: The Babysitter Story That Terrified the Entire Neighborhood. It was posted from an untraceable account. The video showed the house, the rain, the basement, and a girl sitting perfectly still in front of the camera. At the end, she leaned forward and whispered something. "Don't stay past midnight." The comments filled with theories. Some said it was fake. Some said it was a marketing stunt. But one user wrote something different. A comment from an old account: "No profile picture. I live there. The house doesn't want guests. It wants memories." And here's the strangest part. 2 nights ago, another babysitter went missing. Same street. Different house number. But the same timestamp appeared on the last message she sent before disappearing, 12:03 a.m. So if you ever hear knocking after midnight, don't open the door. Don't answer the phone. And for God's sake, never look at the cameras. Because the house remembers. And once it sees you, you're part of the story too. What would you do if this happened to you? Do you think Claire's story was real or just the house playing tricks? Comment if you made it to the end. You're braver than most. I still drive past that street sometimes. The house looks smaller now. Empty. Forgotten. But I swear every time I stop at the light, I see the curtain shift in the upstairs window. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe not. People say time heals everything, but places remember. And that house, it remembers every sound, every scream, every secret ever whispered inside it. If you listen close, you can almost hear her. That same quiet voice, barely a whisper. Asking for help. They never found Claire's body. Only the echo she left behind. And the neighbors still talk about that night when the rain stopped but the knocking didn't. So if you ever find yourself babysitting on a quiet street, and the house feels just a little too still, remember this story. Remember her name. And if you hear your own voice whisper back to you, don't answer. Some stories stay with us because they're meant to warn us. Others, because they're still happening. If you felt something listening to this, a chill, a memory, or maybe just curiosity, tell me what you think it was. Was it fear? Or was it recognition? Comment below. Because sometimes, sharing your story is the only way to make sure it doesn't become someone else's.